Hey everybody, this is the Zek, coach and manager of Team DUEL. Today I wanted to start my series on Erangel Breakdown. So kind of what this series is going to be talking about is using kind of two main resources to talk about the rotational aspects and primary dropping locations of Erangel as a map as a whole. And I like to start the series off of an interesting place, commonplace in pubs, as well as in competitive, as being a highly contested location, as well as a highly valuable location. So combining these two things I want to talk about today is South George, and kind of diving into a few things. Number one is going to be loot overall. The second is going to be getting into your mid-game stage, which is going to be crucial going into mid and late game. So how this South George position actually plays into that from a map, from a circle perspective. And then kind of the third thing overall of kind of the risks involved in this particular area of basically different teams being able to drop in different locations. What are some of the actual risks to be involved on? So first of all, I'm going to be using two main resources. The first resource is definitely going to be talking through this overall interactive map that is created PUBG.com/maps, which has a overall loot efficiency heat map, which is kind of crucial for pointing out where locations are that are good to actually loot and take advantage of basically spending less time in your early game phase and allowing yourselves to rotate earlier, or choosing to loot later, but also loot efficiently. So if we go back, I'm on that South Georgopol area. We can see a high level of some of the different areas on the map that are kind of key points. So the Pachinki, Yasnaya, North and South Georgopol, Severny, Zanarchy, all of these are blobs. Cities are going to have this kind of characteristic towards them. But overall, you can see that Georgopol is kind of a split blob. Pachinki and Yasnaya are a complete blob because of the general connectedness of buildings. Georgopol tends to be a little bit more sparse. North George, less sparse, but all of these are kind of condensed down to one city where you're able to fluidly move throughout it without like kind of worrying about vehicles, and there's less gaps as opposed to North and South George where there's going to be more gaps. If we go ahead and zoom in here, and this is kind of the primary area that I wanted to talk about. So zooming out of South George, I'm going to hop off the webcam actually here just so I can get a full screen aspect, kind of what's happening here. So you can see the loot here is actually really good. The South George area is basically the south block, south of these three apartments, is kind of one of the main areas that people actually go to. People think that crates is actually a valuable dropping position. I feel overall, tying into some other points, that this position right here is basically one of the strongest positions in the South Georgopol area, and maybe potentially one of the strongest positions on the map. The loot efficiency is very, very strong here because of the interconnectedness of buildings and the ability to transition between these. Typical drop locations for a team that's uncontested at South George is really dropping all kind of in this block, kind of consolidated, not having anybody go crates, but using talking a little bit about the buildings and their actual call outs. So we have the South 6, which are priority buildings. These are 2-stack buildings, which are very efficient, one of the most efficient buildings to actually loot overall. So we have so front 6 or South 6 in this case, and then we have North 6 or back 6, which are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 from the road, as well as barn. So typical drop location is potentially 1 or 2 people back here and then 2 people in front. In the case of actually being contested early game, some of the things to actually think about here is consolidating your players, so there's no chance of a team overwhelming you on one of those sides. So you might see something where you take control of back 6 and of back six and work towards apartments and try and cut off a team here, or you do the opposite in that particular case, or you choose to disengage. A little bit harder from the back six location here, but definitely still possible to work out here over towards gas station. And this is just a little bit on the loot side, but you do have this kind of main option, and this is one of the main go-tos of South Georgopol. Another strategy kind of like tying into this actual area is talking a little bit about hospital and a less visited southwest kind of portion of the South Georgopol area, where you're actually going to be taking advantage of a very close-knit set of buildings here, as well as hospital. So one of the main benefits of this actual location is the closeness to cars and the ability to rotate south effectively out of that. One of the common kind of drop strategies in professional play for making this work versus this main kind of area here, that's I would say the number one area, and this being kind of the number two area, is taking hospital position in order to have a kind of outlook position on anywhere south of here in case you need to get vehicles or anything. So good kind of scouting location from Hospital Hill. Also keeping eyes on this priority position of the priorities and front and back six, as well as apartments and everything. So you have a good location. You can easily hop up to the hill to see if anything is happening in this kind of area. So you having like one player in this hospital area and then having two players kind of go here and efficiently loot this and then kind of work out west, and then kind of having one person kind of floating in between these compounds. As you can see, they're very good in compared to like Triple Warehouse, and some different things around this. In combination with car spawns, this can actually work where you can have one person go for a vehicle here. And I talk about the scenario of the basically the priority of vehicles going into the mid game and first circles is very high. So maximizing the number of vehicles you can get along with loot is one of the main things that is actually beneficial here. So kind of tying into these things together, you can have a strategy where one person is kind of focusing on cars and looting the south compound. You can secure most of your team's main loot location through here and kind of be disconnected from other teams here, and then have a hospital person who's just trying to tie everything together. Whereas here, you're kind of going to just be looting these locations and then trying to find a vehicle. In regards to vehicle spawns on here, I'm going to pull up this other map, and we'll turn on. There's no garages in this area. But one of the beneficial parts of going South George is the numerous vehicle spawns that are actually here. So you have a cluster of vehicles around that first priority area. There's 5 total vehicle locations here, and depending upon where teams go in your initial drop scouting, you can easily rotate to different areas to grab more vehicles. Typically, this kind of area is less avoided, especially in like north circles, or should be avoided just as the nature of a lot of teams rotating through here and going into this cube area. But you're able to kind of work the south area if there's no one in this kind of other block here. Oftentimes you'll see one team drop here, or you'll have 1 or 2 teams drop here. Typically, on the professional side, no one has been going and taking advantage of this crates area. You might send 1 or 2 people there just to kind of clear that, grab some scopes from your team for your team, as it's kind of a heavy position in that manner. But oftentimes the meds, ammo, and just getting an AR is enough to get you into the middle and late game. The scopes can definitely help in a lot of scenarios, but because of the sparseness of loots and crates, it's kind of less looked after. But getting back to that vehicle situation, so if you're that first team who decides to take this priority area, you have 5 vehicles pretty close by, and you have a lot of set of options. The second strategy of dropping 1 hospital, 2 in this location, as well as 1 for vehicles, you have this kind of ring around this hay farm area, around the warehouse double compound here, where you can kind of work for a vehicle if you see one and just grab it for your team, and then basically keep note of what is actually going to be happening for the rest of your team to get vehicles. So you can oftentimes secure two kind of at minimum, and upsides of potentially 4 vehicles by taking this strategy and kind of looking for that as one person and securing that at least one car, so you have that kind of safety net in your mind, which is kind of an important thing going into mid game, is having that car control. So that's kind of like 2 strategy breakdowns for that particular case, as well as kind of securing loot in those different locations. But if you're going in that first location, your kind of car focus is here, and then taking advantage of either going east or west, less so east because of the distance traveled, crates and some different things. But if you're uncontested from this side, you can often find cars and have advantage of 9 cars, 9 potential car spawns as opposed to 5. So the second option of this team, as I said, they have the ring here of numerous car spawns they're actually going to be utilizing, as well as still efficient loot. The third person is kind of like their goal is to secure the car, and then 3 others are kind of loot and have like an overlook at hospital. But kind of the second kind of component that I talked about after the loot is kind of getting in there and really talking about the rotational aspects on this actual map. So if I turn off cars from the South George area, one of the things that are often is going to be happening of different zones is you're kind of consolidated here. With teams going Northern George for north rotations, you're either going to have to full loot and then come around this way on this northwest kind of edge here, and that's kind of a limitation there. But with Gatka circles, you're very close by. You can send that the car person pretty early and say, hey, I'm going to pick up the hospital guy. We're going to pick up another car and go to a different location, or just secure a center location if it's a Gatka, Quarry, Prim, kind of ferry pier circle. So you have control of this main block kind of west of Pachinki Hill, where oftentimes in a competitive perspective, not a lot of teams are actually going to be going here. So this whole south of mountain and kind of area around here is kind of open to you to take advantage of. A lot of teams are dropping kind of this area, and you might have 1 or 2 teams scattered within, but oftentimes you're going to be one of the first, if not the first person rotating in a position in this area. For military circles, it's often a little bit more difficult. The kind of plays you can make is kind of get a car early, rotate across, and try and hold a bridge, loot these yellows over here. But most of your actual crossing, if you do as a team want to cross on a military related circle from this South Georgopol position, is going to be trying to maybe get late control of bridge and then work your way across if you want to preserve vehicles, or going ahead and taking advantage of boat locations here, boating all the way around, and then coming up on this west hand side and trying to get some various car locations here, because one of the keys to military circles is actually getting a car. It increases your chance of winning. But you're kind of limited in terms of options here, because your late rotation is not really going to have a safe securing across of the bridge. There's often a lot of teams kind of fighting for this overall area in terms of driving past, trying to swim, and different things there. It might vary for like an East Novo kind of base circle, but it's going to be a kind of a wash based upon how many teams are actually going to be rotating here and going towards the bridge and trying to cross actually early in that particular case. As I talked about with northern circles kind of briefly, this rotational bridge is kind of like off limits, but one of the options you do have is going this crates route and taking advantage of this and trying to get some information on this cube area, and then potentially securing cube as a whole to cross into this northern based region, and then doing some rotates kind of in this sort of fashion, where you're going to be working this north area and kind of going towards where you please. Oftentimes you only have like one team here, and you're kind of racing. If it's like a Severny circle or northeast circle, you're going to be racing a lot of teams in Ra's area to these center positions, but you can also often get a secondary center position depending upon how fast you're looting. Or you can effectively, because of the amount of teams in kind of this area, is maybe at most 2 in northern Georgopol, do an effective northwest rotate and getting kind of above everybody else in that kind of position. Centerized circles around this area, you have an option to kind of late loot, rotate in through here, trying to get a Rozhawk position. Still do that cube strategy of taking advantage of one of these compounds and rotating in. East Coast circles, I'm very much a fan of, if the circle is very far away, you're often better off going ahead and just full looting up, preparing for the actual worst, getting in this circle very, very late, just because of the amount of teams. If it's something like a Milta circle or this side that are actually going to be beating you to that overall position, and then trying to get a secondary position or edge position, and then working through the rest of the game is typically a better strategy. If it does go full coast on you guys, in this South George position, as a result of basically being the distance, the extra minute and a half, 2 minutes that you have to travel just to get over to the position you want. You could do something where you send someone very, very early with maybe just a vehicle or something, but it's a high risk of a person dying. Often people won't actually like crash you in positions. Like if you wanted to take Alamo and you were able to actually secure that, you can do that and get a whole bunch of information, and then potentially rotate into someone else later, so have most of your team loot, and then have one person build up that basis of information. But often going late is a better call, just to secure a little bit more loot, secure more vehicles, and have some more options going into that late game, for something like an East Coast kind of circle. With Stalber and something, it plays similar to North, but you're able to kind of make a decision whether you want to go South side or North side, or go straight up to Stalber. The teams kind of contesting in that particular area aren't going to be anything extraordinary in terms of being able to beat you, and the only team who has like free reign or whatever is a potential kind of northeast Kameshki team or Severny of beating to a center position. But oftentimes what's taken is really going to be on that first circle, where it's something like Stalber is going to be some warehouse compound. So you have free reign to kind of go up into Stalber as one of the actual options for that particular case. So talking a little bit about off of rotations and back into the actual risks kind of involved here is definitely something with those East Coast circles where it's heavily compound favored. You're kind of at a disadvantage of being able to actually rotate early on and secure that kind of centralized compound, but it's less important for that first circle. So you can kind of mitigate it and figure out how to rotate later on better. So if that kind of plays into your strengths of being able to sneak your way into, like, say, third circle, a really good compound that you can get a whole bunch of information on, you can kind of play that into your advantage, and it's not really a disadvantage. But oftentimes a lot of this is heavily contested, and you're having to play a lot of weird edge positions. But knowing the map and being able to out gunfight some different teams and kind of out position or late rotate is really going to be a big advantage if you can turn it into your favor. But that's one of the actual risks. In terms of potential contests, this priority -- position, as long as you're consolidating your team, you can mitigate that. You do have gun RNG loot if they're dropping in kind of the same location, but oftentimes you can have 4 and move as an actual unit, and kind of take advantage of that and then make trades. So if someone does go down on your team, if you're being very close together, in a like centralized first position, of priority in South George, you can mitigate that by making efficient trades for your team and trying not to lose people in that particular case. Or if this area is free, rotate out, make some different changes. So this kind of like location here is almost better to take instead of the apartments, because of the ability to kind of rotate out, get these access to vehicles a lot easier than this back 6 location with the 3 apartments. Even though the 3 apartments provide a good vantage point, as long as you can cross safely across the lane, very common call out in pro scene, you can kind of able to sneak your way out of there. So that's talking about a little bit about contests. One of the risk factors that's not really a risk factor is cars. As I showed previously, ignoring garages, you have a lot of different options. If one of these 5 spawns in this first one is not going to be good for you, you might have a little bit of issues. You also might want to think about, instead of looting right away, if you know no one's contesting this block but someone's in this block, you might want to grab a car first and secure it before actually looting, so that way your team doesn't risk at post looting having to grab some sort of vehicle and getting shot at crossing into a middle road. So that's one way to mitigate that risk. In the event that there are no cars here, that can be something that's kind of troublesome. You might need to foot it a little bit all the way east if there's some team here, or potentially fight into another team. So those are some different things to think about. With the second strategy, one of the options is if you do kind of like have someone here, they can push the 2 members, and it's a little bit harder to handle that situation with one person being here, and then the kind of floater person whose goal is to try and get a car. Talking about that specifically, but cars don't typically become an issue when you're in the South Georgopol location. One of the issues you probably will face is really the location of rotation of the percentage of the map that's on this side. Often you're going to have to rotate east, which is a smidge harder in terms of being able to do that. Not maybe center circles are kind of less bad, but there are a lot of choke points that you as a team are going to have to like effectively get information, determine if you can move through a choke, and then actually move through a choke if you can, or figure out a different way of actually getting through that. So you can mitigate that with scouting cars, some different options on that particular front, but those are kind of the primary risks of actually dropping there, and kind of getting into that mid-game location. Ending circles in this location, kind of want to add this. You have a lot of different options if the circle does pop on you. Oftentimes these garage-based compounds are often better, or something like a triple warehouse, in the ability to effectively hide cars, take advantage of that, and grab one of those compos in the case that is there. but you always have like an option, like if it's centered somewhere around crates, to take this or take early mountain or late mountain. Georgopol circles kind of vary in the way that they play, because often there are a lot of teams actually alive. So that's a little bit about the South Georgopol location. Some different things on the efficiency of looting there, as well as kind of looking into some rotations and then mitigating some of the risks. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I plan to do this for different positions on the map. If there's one in particular you'd like to see next, feel free to let me know in the comments or on the post that I'm going to be making on Reddit for our competitive PUBG. And I'll go ahead and address the highest rated one next, and then I'll give my general coaching overview on that. Thanks.